Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Peak Season Podcast, where the guests are happy and the hosts are caffeinated. With me, I got my partner, Luke. Welcome, Luke. How's it going?
Good. I am extra caffeinated today. I didn't stop all day, I don't think.
I feel you. I feel like I drank a diet soda earlier, and I'm like, I'm probably going to regret this later when I get sick, but we'll see how it goes.
I'm a big afternoon coffee fan.
I can't do that. Not this late. Or
I can't
later
not
in the
do
day.
it.
Well, everybody, in this episode today, we got something a little bit different for our listeners, and we really want to allow our listeners to get to know us more, right? Not only as people, but as investors and as co-hosts people. So today we're going to kick it off, and first I'm going to have Luke just do a quick introduction, and then we're going to go into some questions for Luke.
Sure. So, as you all know, my name is Luke Miller. I live in Houston, Texas currently. I'm from Michigan originally. I've been in Houston for like the last, 14 years almost now. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan. Right out of high school, I went in the Marine Corps, and I did 5 years in the Marine Corps as an air traffic controller. And shortly after I got out of the Marine Corps, I transitioned into what was a amazing job, and I've been doing that ever since. And I've got 2 kids, 7 and 9, happily married, just basically living the American dream, and kind of excited to share how I got into the short-term rental world and what got me to where I am today.
That's awesome, Luke. Thank you for your service and from one veteran to another. And Luke, talk to us just maybe how about a little high level timeline? When did you really start getting into short term rentals, and what did you do before you bought a short term rental property?
Yeah, so I have been in real estate investing in one form or another since 2000. When I was like 20 years old or 21 years old, we bought our first home. My wife and I were married young. We bought our first home. It was a starter home. Like back then you couldn't lose money on a house. And we all know what happened, right in 2008, right? So we bought into this brand new neighborhood, bought a brand new house, and the real estate market crashed in '08. And every house in the neighborhood went into foreclosure. The builder went out of business. And we were sitting there in this, in this neighborhood where it was like 25% built and every house in foreclosure, and we're just sitting there. And it became time for us to kind of move on. We sat there, we just kind of waited and paid the mortgage for a year or two, and it was time for us to move on to kind of upgrade homes and things like that. And I was kind of like, well, I really don't want to have a home go into foreclosure, but I can't stay here forever like this. And I started looking around, and apartment complexes right down the road were charging more than my mortgage for a 2-bedroom apartment. We had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, nice new house. So started renting it out, and we just kept doing that. We had a couple other long-term rentals along the way, but we kept doing that until 2022. And by then, everything, of course, had turned around, and I took the proceeds from the sale of that home eventually and bought my first short-term rental. So I bought my first short-term rental in 2022, and we can get more into that. But I bought that first short-term rental in 2022, the proceeds from that home, and the rest is history. We've kept buying since then, and really found a way to get more into real estate investing instead of just kind of passively having these long-term rentals operating in the background.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Luke. So, unlike yourself, I didn't have any long term rental properties prior to, but what how did you hear about short-term rentals, and what was kind of the deciding factor for you to like, okay, I'm serious now and I'm going to pull the trigger and actually do this?
Yeah, so I got out of the Marine Corps in 2008, and I've been at the same job ever since I got out of the Marine Corps. And around 2020, we sort of had some changes in our profession where things got, I don't want to say shaky, but the job that I thought that I would always be at and that was going to provide me with this amazing retirement and all that, it sort of got to the point where I was like, man, maybe I don't want to put all my eggs in this basket anymore. And right around then, I started looking at, how can I diversify, and how can I maybe learn a new skill or get into something to where, if this job that I love and that I've been with so long goes away, I have something else to fall back on. And that was when I really started looking at short-term rentals. Now, unfortunately, I procrastinated all the way through COVID, And because this was like early 2020 when I started thinking about this, and I procrastinated all the way through COVID when the time was right to buy, and I bought in 2022, like a month after interest rates went up.
Yeah. You know that feeling.
Yeah, yeah, hey, I mean, the best time to buy real estate was always yesterday, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yep.
And Luke, if you don't mind sharing with your listeners, our listeners, you out of all the markets, what market were really you look honing in on? Were you looking, at Michigan specifically because you were from Michigan? Were you looking at Florida because you wanted a beach house? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was very risk averse and I got into, all the short-term rental YouTubes and Facebook groups and, read all the basic books, your with, built what is it? Short-term rental long-term wealth by Avery Carl. I reread all the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff that I read in the early
Mhm.
2000s and I really got into it and I decided that I wanted to buy in the Smokies because I felt like that was the safest. Because there was a network there of people that were going to be easy to fall back on because there was millions of people going there every year. It's like the quintessential short-term rental market, right? So I did all the research, I ran all the spreadsheets. I got, and this is one thing we'll talk about in a little bit, but I like to deep dive and really nerd out about things. And that is what I did about the Smoky Mountains and specifically, short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains. So I bought a property in the Smoky Mountains, sight unseen. I had never been to the Smoky Mountains. The first time I set foot in the home was after I closed on it, and I went all in.
But you knew
And I
those
wouldn't
numbers.
recommend anybody do that today. I knew those numbers. I knew the numbers. I was very confident in the numbers. I had talked to the neighbors. I mean, I did a lot of research, and I don't think it would have changed my mind had I actually physically stepped foot in the house. But I do think knowing now what I didn't know then, you need to be in your homes before you buy them, at least for the inspection. But yeah.
I mean, similarly, and I'll give this away, I was very similar in the fact that I put in an offer before I saw the house because my property was, 4.5 hours away and I knew it was going to go quick. And I, you know, was like, put in an offer and I was like, I'll figure the rest out later. But, procrastination was at its finest. It took me 2 years before I purchased the short-term rental property, so I know exactly what you mean, and I think probably a lot of our listeners were that way, right? But, I think, now things are a little bit different, probably a little bit more seasoned, and we feel a little bit more confident. You bought in the Smokies, now, have more properties in Northern Michigan, and talk to me about what really piqued your interest about Michigan and Northern Michigan specifically? Like what kind of transition? Hey, Pigeon Forge I like, but I don't love. Here's where I want to be.
Yeah, so I think to kind of get into what I really love about Northern Michigan, we have to kind of talk about what my experience was like in the Smoky Mountains.
Let's do it.
And I bought a duplex that was a 4-4 and there was 2 bedrooms, 2 baths on each side and it was like a half mile from Dollywood, which is ground zero in the Smokies. The location could not be better. And these things ran at like 92% occupancy. As long as they were priced right, they booked. They did exactly almost to the dollar the first year what I expected they were going to do. And then we continued that through the entire process. So they actually performed very well. But what I didn't understand that I was getting into was that I didn't have any way to make these properties better. I could design them well, but other than that, they had to be ran well in order to make money. And we ran them well and they made money. But there was no way for me to go outside and expand the outdoor living space or to make them different from the house next door in any way. It was purely going to come down to the operations as to whether or not they're going to be profitable or not. And I felt very uncomfortable with that. I didn't want to be in a position where I had to compete on price in order to get booked. I wanted to be able to say, I'm the only person that has X in this market, and that's why you come to me. And you're just not going to get that in the Smoky Mountains. Now, what you will get is millions of people visiting every year, and the demand will always be there because the fundamentals of that market are amazing. So as long as you have a good view or a good location or whatever, you're gonna do at least okay. But I didn't want to run a property like that long term where I was having to basically be in a knife fight to be profitable. And when I started shopping for another property, I did a free consultation with Kenny Bedwell from STR Insights. And one of the things is I told him all the markets I was looking at and kind of told him what I was looking to spend and all that. And He said very, very quickly and clearly, like, go Michigan, go unique, don't look at anything else. And I said, okay, noted. Now I did go on and I used his property finder service and all that.
Sure.
But but really, he gave me that one piece of advice, and I just clung to that because I mean, if an expert gives you that, and he is an expert property finder, he knows what he's talking about. If you can get an expert to give you crystal clear advice like that, take it and run with it. So, I guess we could say it now. I mean, when Tyler put his first property on Facebook in a Facebook group, I said that is in Michigan. That's an area I love, and that is unique as all hell. And I saw that there was a long list of people in the comments saying, "Hey, send me the info, send me the info." And I PM'd Tyler immediately. I said, "Hey, let's get on a call. Can you talk?" And
So,
so,
listeners, that is our connection.
yep,
How do I know Luke? How does Luke know me? Well, I sold Luke my first STR property. And we'll go into why I did that when it's my turn to talk about me. But
yeah,
that's exactly
teaser.
what happened. STR Homes for Sale, I think, right on
Yep,
Facebook is where it
yep,
was. And definitely had a lot of interest, but and spoke to a lot of people, but Luke definitely piqued my interest, and loved that he was a Michigander himself, born and raised, and had roots here. So the rest was history from there.
yeah. So kind of progressing further into the journey, when that house piqued my interest and I saw how unique it was and I saw the unique opportunities to expand and the location, I just knew that that was one I had to have, and it has not let me down. I plan on that being a very long-term hold for me. But Michigan has, especially certain parts of Michigan, have a lot of rental demand, but they don't have a lot of professional hosts that are doing things the right way, that are offering amazing amenities and amazing stays. And you have ways that you can stand out and you don't necessarily have to compete on price. And it is the polar opposite of the Smokies in that way. It is a little more rural and there's unique challenges with that, but I've really found a niche where I absolutely love it, and I feel when I fly in to usually it's Traverse City to visit my properties, I feel a special kind of way when I land that I never felt when I was in the Smoky Mountains. I still like the Smoky Mountains, but you know if you could bottle up that feeling and try and sell it to other people, that's a special thing to be able to do, and I enjoy it.
So it's funny you say that. If you ask any of my friends or family, when we're talking about my property or properties I had in Michigan, they'll say one term, my happy place. That's what I call it. I'm like, Michigan, Northern Michigan's my happy place, man. I just feel different. The vibes I get, and it doesn't even matter the season, man. Matter of fact, like most people are like, "Ooh, winter Northern Michigan." I'm like, I freaking love Northern Michigan in the winter. I'll sit
Yeah,
up there all day, looking at that snow, drinking my beer in the evening at Beers Inwood, and whatever it is, right, that brings me joy. It's truly my happy place. So I get that feeling, man. It is something special.
for sure. And as we've continued progressing into this journey, I've learned a lot about myself and kind of what makes me tick. And this year I mean, I've got one property under contract. I'm renovating another one. We're starting this business. We're doing this podcast, and it's really exciting to me to really get more into this. And like the title sort of suggests for this episode, I feel happiest when I am kind of, I guess the best analogy I can think of is, Tyler, when you're doing some work around your house and you've got a ladder up and you're painting or you're hanging something or whatever, and everyone's got that point where they are climbing up a ladder to where they take one more step and they feel kind of wobbly and they're not sure if they're comfortable with it. Well, I'm happiest as a person, metaphorically, when I'm on that step where I'm not quite sure, where I'm starting to feel a little bit shaky and I need to kind of talk myself through it and say, listen, you're only 4 feet off the ground, Luke. It's fine. If you fall, you're not going to die. But where you starting to feel a little bit wobbly,
I think
and
that's
you
where you
have
grow
to
the
level
most.
yourself up.
Yeah, I think that's where you grow the most, to level yourself up, right? No, I am 100% the same way as you, right? I like uncomfort brings me some comfort in a way. So I think that's where we're both similar in that fashion. And Luke, you talked about this just a second ago, right? So we're doing the podcast, doing the co-hosting. You bought a couple properties, and these properties, these two additional properties are really new to you, right? So one is kind of let's talk a little bit about it. So let's talk about Almhouse. Tell me a little bit about Almhouse, and then we'll talk about the other new property. Both these properties coming up near the Bel Air, Michigan area, right?
Yeah, so they're in Bel Air. Elm House is what we're calling it. Is it was a when we bought it, it was a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, and it was fairly recently renovated on the second and third floors, and it had like a basement that you drove into, a basement slash garage underneath it. And I noticed that there was kind of a hole in the market where 4 bedroom, 3 bath properties were doing exceptionally well, especially if you could sleep like 12 people. So 3 baths, my general rule is like 4 people per bathroom max. So 3 baths was going to be necessary. So we're adding a living area, a full bedroom, and a bathroom underneath. The garage doors turning into big glass sliders. It's going to be pretty cool, I think. Uh, but it's going to be very unique. It's on some nice land. It's secluded, but still close to everything there in Bel Air. So it should be a 4 season market with because there's skiing and things like that in Bel Air. Golf the rest of the year. It's close to the lakes, and that has been under renovation now for about 6 or 7 weeks, and we're hoping it's going to be done here the next 2 weeks. So,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. So it has been a journey, going through and managing that from afar and making sure that all the trains are running on time. And we've got an amazing team that's been helping out, but it's kind of been a daily. I don't want to say stressful because I enjoy it, but it's definitely stressful because if I slack off, it will probably take 6 months instead of 2 months. So
Yeah,
I
I
have to
mean,
stay
you're
on top of
project
it.
managing the project, right, from
Right.
afar, and that can present its challenges for sure.
Yeah. Yep. And then really wanted to get another property under contract this year, and we just got one under contract last week. That's about 2 miles away from there. And this one does not need as much work, but it's going to be a four. It was listed as a 3, 2.5. It's going to go on Airbnb as a 4, 2.5.
Okay.
Yep. And that one is fairly turnkey. We're going to have to do some furnishing, add a hot tub, things like that. But I'm hoping like in a long weekend, we get that one up and running.
So, Luke, all this going on, again, you like the comfort of uncomfortness, helps kind of push you and move the needle. What would you recommend to our listeners? Maybe how about this? Let's start with this. What would you recommend to a listener who's put ourselves back into our very first STR? What would you recommend to a listener who's maybe listening to our podcast and they're listening because they're interested in buying their first short-term rental, but haven't pushed the needle a little far enough yet to make that decision. But what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would say run your numbers, know your numbers, top to bottom, left to right. Think about all your contingencies, leave some room for error. And that was the reason, but why I felt comfortable buying that first property in the Smoky Mountains. I bought it sight unseen and made that mistake only because I think I left myself vulnerable. I don't think it would have changed anything. And there were no surprises. It was exactly as I expected it to be. I did a FaceTime with the realtor and all that, but just know your investment top to bottom, left to right, leave no stone unturned. But at the end of the day, pull the trigger. Because if you're properly underwriting a property and if you're going through all the processes, and feel free to just shoot me a DM or whatever, I'll help you walk through it. But if you're running the property properly, or if you're underwriting it properly, even if it underperforms, it should break even. Right. And which means it's probably going to outperform a long term rental. And, you know, just like that first property I purchased in 2008, I have this saying that time heals all real estate mistakes, right? Like, as long as you can stay the course and float the property for a few years, you'll be okay. You'll come out of it. But where you don't do your due diligence is where something could happen and, and you might not come out of it okay. So as long as you're doing the work on the front end, have some faith in yourself and pull the trigger.
Yeah, I couldn't agree any more with that, Luke. I think, and just to add one point to that though, you know, I'm going to try to get it too in depth here, but I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. Prior to getting my first STR property in Michigan, I actually had been looking in Kentucky. I'm a bourbon guy. I love bourbon. So I was looking at a place near and around the distilleries, and man, I found this perfect B&B that I actually stayed in. So I knew that property very well.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out, man. We got down to some kind of sketchy foundation issues that the guy just wasn't going to do. And I was already kind of at my comfort of my numbers of what I needed to purchase that to make some money. And, I just had to walk away. And it took me another year to get a property up north. But, again, everything happens for a reason. And that brought me to Seven Pines and that brought you to Seven Pines. And, we're here because of Seven Pines, us together. So
Yeah.
again, I'm a firm believer everything happens for a reason. So know your numbers, pull the trigger, but if it doesn't work out, no, that one wasn't meant to be, but keep the momentum moving forward. Right.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I sort of try and frame investment decisions or just decisions about my career or my life in general is, I mean, like I said earlier, I have two amazing daughters. They're 7 and 9. But before I had kids, I didn't really put things in this perspective. And before I had daughters, especially. But, when I'm 70 years old and they have a husband, I like to think, what would I want to see that man doing? Right? Would he run into something half-heartedly, or would he, you know, take huge financial risks? Well, no, he should be doing his due diligence and getting into smart investments. And he certainly shouldn't count on, like taking this back to 2020 when I first got into this, he certainly wouldn't count on his employer, which may not be on the most firm footing, to be the sole provider for his family. So, we have to take charge of our own destiny sometimes and get in the captain's seat and make things happen. And, Tyler, like we were talking about, when we launch Elm House in a couple weeks, like if I don't get some bookings this year, it's not going to be great. And I said, I will fly up there and stand on the side of the road with a sign about Elm House if I have to do it. And I meant that, like, I will will it into existence that this place is going to book and it's going to be a success, right? Because there is no other choice. So,
No, I love your drive and determination. It's definitely admirable. So, Luke, let's flip it. With a little bit more time left, I wanted to flip to though. Let's talk about the other end, and I want to listen to this advice too because I'm kind of in the same spot, and you definitely have more experience than me in this. So, being fully transparent here and appreciating it and acknowledging your experience and expertise. Talk to me about short-term rental owners. They have one property, they're looking to expand, haven't pulled the trigger. Well, what do you recommend to them, or what guidance would you give those type of listeners?
yeah, I would say, get yourself into positions where you are uncomfortable. If you're not comfortable, like 100% comfortable buying another property, like that's probably a good thing. That means that you're being smart about it, especially if you have one successful one behind you. You should come into this expecting things to go wrong and expecting your numbers not to be 100% every single time and leaving that margin for error, but also put yourself in positions where you the dumbest person in the room. And that's why I've joined masterminds, I've joined mentorship groups, I've went to conferences where I've just been in the room with people that are talking about things and I have no idea what they're saying, or all I can do is sit there and listen, because if I talk, I'm going to basically, step in it. So I think putting yourself in those positions to be uncomfortable and to broaden your horizons is the first thing. And it's kind of like a risk-free way of doing it, right? The worst thing that happens is you look like a dummy. But I mean, I would rather look like a dummy and level up than stay in my comfort zone for the rest of my life, 100% of the time. So that'd be my biggest advice, is just do the work and put yourself in the presence of people that are going to help you grow.
Love it. All right, Luke, as we wrap up, any last comments, anything else that you want our listeners to know about Mr.
No, I think we pretty much covered it, man. I learned something in this podcast. I didn't know you were a bourbon fan. So next time we're up north, we're definitely going to
My
have to make some
goodness.
old fashions.
Oh, for sure. And of
Yeah.
course, like every time I go, I hit Mammoth because that's right there in Central Lake by the cabins.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that place. And then, if I'm feeling frisky, I'll go down and hit Traverse City Whiskey Company and, a few of the other ones. A fun fact, I forget what the distillery is. Oh, Grand Traverse Distillery just opened a tasting shop in Charlevoix. Pretty exciting. So
I think the plane tickets are buying themselves right now, my friend.
there we go. We'll see you up there soon. Well, everybody, I appreciate you listening in. Thanks so much for tuning in to the peak season. And Luke, send us off, my friend.
I will go ahead and follow up with we would appreciate a 5-star review and a subscribe. And we would love to connect with you on upstreamvacations.com. And everybody have a great night.
Have a good one, everyone.